turn to the song in the center. If we never meet again. Soon we'll come to the end of life's journey, and perhaps we'll never meet anymore, till we gather in heaven's bright city, far away on that beautiful shore. If we never
sky.
behalf of the family, I'd like to say thank you for everyone for coming. Your presence here on a very emotional day means a lot to this family. It means a lot to them. It means a lot to Bobbie and Jerry. It means a lot to the people that loved her and knew her the best. So I want you to know how much I appreciate your presence and taking time out of your day to be here. Bobbie Gunnels went home to be with the Lord on Friday morning, October 25th, 2019. She is survived by her husband of 68 years, Jerry Gunnels, her son and daughter-in-law, Shell and Carol Gunnels, and her grandsons, Colby and wife Brittany Gunnels, Casey and wife Megan Gunnels. She is also survived by 5 great-grandchildren, Carter, Caleb, Eli, Corey, and Allie Gunnels, and her sister, Edna Glover. Bobbie was an active and lifelong member of the Church of Christ, worshiping with the Hillside congregation. She was a simple, gentle, and content woman who loved unselfishly and without reservation. She was kind and pleasant to all she met and exemplified the teaching to put others above herself. She found joy in the simple things in life, such as preparing countless meals for family and friends, and also lovingly scolding her husband for yelling at the TV. She was a meek and gentle soul who possessed a strength of character that left an indelible mark on her family. Bobbie was one of the precious few who truly understood that happiness did not come from status or material possessions, but rather from the bonds of family and friends. She lived a life that was simple in most respects and difficult at times, having been born into a family of 13 in the middle of the Great Depression. But she died as one of the richest individuals that this world has ever known, surrounded by those she loved, having laid up for herself untold treasure in heaven. One of her great-granddaughters, Allie, has decided to come up and read something for us all. As she wrote personally, we're going to ask her to do so this time.
She had support for me and Eli until she ran out of them. I only got grapes sometimes. I got apple. I love her so much. Mama, she could knit so good. She even could sew a quilt. Mama made Papa and a comb and happy.
Let's bow in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this opportunity to be together with friends and with family, loved ones, Lord. We thank you for the opportunity to celebrate a woman that is so special to every single one of us, old and young. We thank you, Lord, for the hope that we have in your salvation. We thank you, Lord, for the hope that we now believe is realized within Bobbie's presence in you. We pray, Lord, this morning or this afternoon for comfort, for strength. We pray, Lord, that you would help us to always live in a way that not only honors her, but ultimately honors you. We pray, Lord, that as we leave this place eventually, you give us the strength that we need to move on with our lives, but help us to always keep her memory alive. These things we pray in your Son's name.
Per Allie's request, the next song will be the first one on your fold-out, when the roll is called up yonder. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and time shall be no more, and the morning breaks eternal, bright and fair, when the saints of earth shall gather over on the upper shore, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, 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 I'll be there. On that bright and cloudless morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and his glory of his resurrection share, when his chosen ones shall gather to their home beyond the skies, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll Then when all of life is over and our work on earth is done, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there.
Next song will be in the back of your fold out. It is well with my soul.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well with my soul.
One of the most comforting passages for me to read at funerals, or to think about during funerals, is 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And that chapter is known for Paul addressing a lot of issues that happen. And Paul would do that a lot in the book of 1 Corinthians. But by the time he gets to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, he's addressing this issue that some people had, that the resurrection was never going to come. And while that may seem like somewhat of maybe a superficial issue at first, when you think about it, it has a lot of implications. The idea that Jesus isn't coming back, the idea that we'll never be resurrected. It was causing a lot of damage to a lot of people's faith at that church at Corinth. And so Paul devoted an entire chapter, 58 straight verses, to addressing this heresy. And Paul talks about a lot of things throughout the course of that chapter. He begins it talking about all the different people that had seen Jesus resurrected. And he connects it to the fact that if Jesus is resurrected, so we too will be resurrected. And as you move throughout the course of that chapter, it becomes progressively more intense. And by the time you get to the end of that chapter, Paul hits his crescendo when he says, "O death, where is your victory? O Hades, where is your sting?" Because we as Christians have found the victory over death and over sin through our victory in Jesus Christ. There's a section, though, that's plugged right in the middle of that. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, starting around verse 35, I think is very interesting. I think especially pertinent for our services today, especially when it comes to Bobbie. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, starting in verse 35, Paul writes, "Someone will say," this is the question that they had, "someone will say, how are the dead raised up? And with what do they even come?" That question comes from an honest place, because if this physical body will eventually return to the dust from whence it came, then what kind of body will we have in the resurrection? That's a very honest question that they're asking. And Paul responds in verse 36 by saying, "O foolish one, what you sow is not made alive unless it dies. And what you sow, you do not sow that body that shall be, but mere grain, perhaps wheat or some other grain. But God," verse 38, "gives it a body as he pleases, and to each seed its own body. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of animals, another of fish, and another of birds. There are also celestial bodies, terrestrial bodies, but the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another." What Paul is saying at this point is that the body that we'll have spiritually in heaven forever is not like the one that we have here. This one is made for a purpose. It has an expiration date on it. The one that we'll have in heaven is immortal, it lasts forever. And he continues with that in verse 41. He says, "There is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars, for one star differs from another star in glory." Listen to this, in verse 42. "So also is the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown in corruption, it is now raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor, and yet it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, and yet it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, and yet it is raised a spiritual body." There's a natural body, and there's a spiritual body. What Paul describes in this powerful section of 1 Corinthians 15 that almost always goes overlooked in this section is that there is a physical body that we inhabit here on earth, but that physical body, as we just said, has an expiration date. It wasn't meant to last forever. And we know that the spiritual body, the one that we'll inhabit with heaven, that's immortal. That's incorruptible. That lasts forever. But if you notice the metaphor that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, what he says and how he uses it, he describes it in terms of agriculture. He says you put a seed into the ground, and to the naked eye, to your mortal eyes, it seems like it dies because you put it in the ground and you wait. But then over time, that seed springs forth a plant that is so much more magnificent than the seed ever was. And he has that immortal phrase there in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, that which you sow cannot be reaped unless it first dies. And so what Paul talks about, not only in this section, but really throughout the course of 1 Corinthians 15, is the necessity of death. The fact that death has to come to each and every one of us. And even though it's sad, even though it's emotional, what we know looking at it is that it gives birth to something that's spiritual. It gives birth to something eternal. In the same way, our bodies have to die in order to become what we were truly meant to be in the resurrection. As he would say a few verses later, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. And so these bodies have to die in order to receive our spiritual body, which will never die. That may be kind of an intense concept, and I know that was kind of a tough way to open up a funeral sermon. That's a really intense theological concept, spiritual concept. But I would argue to you this afternoon that Bobbie knew that better than anybody. I don't know where you know Bobbie from. I don't know every single person that's in this room. But it doesn't really matter where you knew Bobbie from or how long you knew Bobbie. We all know one thing about Bobbie, and that is that woman loved to spend time in her garden. As a matter of fact, I remember several years ago, it wasn't long after I moved here, that she was in, I think, the frozen food section at Walmart, and she happened to slip, and she broke her leg in a pretty violent way. I won't go into the details, but she broke her leg in a really hard way. I went to go visit her in the hospital, and she had this really elaborate, long surgery. She recovered. Weeks later, guess where she was? Out in her garden. where no more than a few years later, in that very garden, she yet broke her leg once again. And you would think at that point, maybe I should not spend time in the garden. But even as late as this summer, she would go into the garden to work, and one of the ladies from church would come over and spend hours with her tending in that same garden. As a matter of fact, even up until the last few days that she was able to speak, she still talked about spending time in the garden. That woman loved to spend time amongst God's creation. And since she spent so much time out there, she undoubtedly watched exactly what Paul described on a very physical way. She watched several million seeds fall into the earth, disappear from the view, and then return as a beautiful plant. Whether it was a squash or zucchini, not so much beautiful as they are delicious. But a squash or zucchini, or even one of those apple trees that line her driveway heading up to her house. She saw what Paul was talking about over and over and over again. And so for her, this deep spiritual concept of death, burial, and resurrection were on display every single day of her life. She understood that idea of death and then putting it in the ground, and then resurrection. So I would argue that she understands 1 Corinthians 15 a lot better than probably a lot of us, probably a lot better than I do. It takes a special kind of person, I would argue, to be a gardener. I don't really have the patience for it. Whenever I'm hungry, I tend to go down to Taco Bell and get a couple of chalupas, and that's enough for me. That's not enough for Bobbie. Bobbie was one who not only loved to garden, but she also loved to share the fruits of the garden. She loved to share it in her home. As a matter of fact, if you went over to her house at any one random part of the day, and she had at least 5 minutes before she knew you were coming, you can bet that when you walked in, there was an entire feast that was probably enough to feed this half of the auditorium every single time. I remember several times I would try to go over there, and I would try to strategically place it so that I didn't go over there at a mealtime, right around like 8:30, maybe 3:30 in the afternoon, just because I didn't want her to have to go to the trouble. It didn't matter because every single time I walked through the door, there was a feast on the table that was meant for probably a lot more people than I did. And I was always, by the way, expected to eat every single drop, which I did. As you can tell, I don't really have a problem with that. But I think that attitude of gardening and sharing the crops, I think that attitude is a part of the responsibility of gardeners. In the Old Testament, specifically in the book of Leviticus, you have this idea where if you own a field, you don't harvest all the way to the edges. You leave the outside edges for people that happen to be walking by. Jesus' disciples did this on a number of occasions. And even though Bobbie wasn't following the Old Testament when she decided to do this, she still embodied that same type of hospitality idea, that same type of hospitality. She absolutely loved entertaining, and people loved to be entertained by her. It seems cliche always at funerals to say the phrase that everybody loved her, and I've said that before, and I always mean it. I never mean it in a cliche way, but it seems cliche to say that. But believe me when I tell you that every single person that I've ever heard of in my life loved Bobbie Gunnels. I don't know of any enemies she had. I don't know of her ever saying a cross word about anybody. I don't ever remember her gossiping about anybody. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know she could be angry until I read in the obituary that she used to yell at Jerry for yelling at the TV. I didn't know that side of her personality. Every time I saw her, and it didn't matter if it was a big room or a little room, every time you saw her, you got a 1,000 megawatt smile the second that you walked into the room. That's just the type of person that she was. When Carol posted on Friday about the fact that Bobbie had passed away, nearly 150 comments inside of 24 hours came on her status, and the one word that popped up in at least half of those comments, and I think this is very fitting, is the word sweet. She was a sweet lady. She was a sweetheart. She was such a sweet person. And that's a very broad, but also a very specific, and yet not specific enough word to describe somebody like that. Somebody who seemed to embody so many positive attributes, and somebody who literally loved every single person that I've ever met. I'm not exaggerating when I say she had no enemies. I'm not exaggerating when I say that she was universally loved by every single person that I ever knew about. The question then, as you can talk about that, is how do you not want to be around somebody like that every single day of your life? I've always found it interesting, and yet not really puzzling at the same time, that Bobbie and Jerry have lived in the same house since I think, the 60s? And yet her son lives within 1 mile of her on the other side. And her grandson Casey lives within 2 miles of her on the other side. That's not just a close-knit family. That's a family that loves each other. That's a family that cherishes, respects, and honors each other. And you can see the same type of love that's embodied within Bobbie trickle down towards her family. What's amazed me in this whole process, from the time that she's been sick to the time that she passed away, and even up until this afternoon, what's amazed me about the whole process is the strength that every single one of these family members possesses. I haven't been to probably nearly as many funerals as a lot of people, but I have yet to see someone's great-granddaughter get up and read a handwritten note about how much they love their great-grandmother. That speaks volumes about this family. That speaks volumes about the love that they have for each other. And not just with one generation, but with all 4 generations that are alive today. That's why I think when you look at all 3 songs that we sang today, and I'm sure you noticed the theme, all 3 of the songs that we sang today, they all talked about the certainty of the resurrection. They all talk about the certainty of that hope. When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. There's no guesswork that. If we never meet again this side of heaven, there's another meeting place somewhere in heaven. The certainty with that. But this last song I thought was probably the most poignant. When we sing that beautiful, amazing song, that it is well with my soul. It has a certain amount of stoicism to it, a certain amount of steadfastness to it. That seems almost absent in so many funerals today. If you know anything about the history of that song, you know that it was penned by a person who lost his entire family in one sweeping, tragic accident. And yet looking at the accident, looking at the family members that he lost, and then remembering the hope that he has with God, he wrote the simple words, that it is well with my soul. I talked to Shell on Friday morning after learning that Bobbie had passed away. And after expressing my condolences when we talked about Bobbie and her life for a few minutes, I said, I'm sorry that she passed away. And he said something very peculiar. He said to me, Brady, the hard part is over. And I thought that was an interesting phrase, because usually when somebody passes away, for a lot of people, the hard part is almost just beginning. Because it's usually at this point that the grieving process starts. You start grieving, you start remembering all these things, and so you have all these emotions that just come flooding through. But for Shell to just adamantly say, the hard part is over, I think that speaks volumes about his steadfastness and his faith. The fact that Bobbie had spent her whole life sowing seeds for this moment, and now she's reaping the rewards of that labor. Their strength and their faith is indicative of the strength and the faith that Bobbie helped instill in them. I'm reminded of when Paul told the young evangelist Timothy that his grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice had taught him the scriptures that are able to make him wise into salvation. This type of generational faith you see within Bobbie's family. Shell is one of our 3 elders that we have at Hillside, and her grandson Casey, one of our deacons that we have at Hillside. And both of these men and their families are active members that embody servitude and humility. And those that know the rest of the family see those same traits embodied elsewhere in them. Those are traits that gardeners need. They need the patience to watch a seed grow. They need the work ethic to cultivate the plant. But they ultimately need the humility to realize that the growth comes from God and not from yourself. Funerals are always hard. I've always thought that funerals are not necessarily for the dead as much as they are for the living. They're a time for us to reminisce, a time to comfort each other, a time to learn, but ultimately they're a time for us to say goodbye. That's never easy, is it? Because selfishly, we always want just a little bit more time. It doesn't matter that Bobbie lived to be 91 years old. It doesn't matter that she was married to her sweetheart for nearly 70 years. It doesn't matter that she got to not watch just 1 or 2 generations after her, but 3 generations be born. We still want just a little bit more time. But even though Bobbie's life here is over, I would argue too that her life with God is just beginning. That started Friday when she left us on this earth and went to the intimate arms of Jesus. As King David told those around him when he found out that his son had died, he said to those around him, he can't return to me, but I can go to him. Let's go to where Bobbie is. Let's live in such a way that when we die, we shed this seed of a body and put on the one that will never die, the one that we are truly meant for. Let's all pray together. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this opportunity to say goodbye to the woman that we all love so much. We thank you, Lord, for her example, for her faith, for her steadfastness, for her courage, for her meekness, for her patience. We thank you, Lord, so much for her hospitality. We thank you for her example that she set for all of us. We thank you most of all, especially today, Lord, for the love that she showed towards you every single day of her life, not just in lip service, but obedient faith manifested towards you every single day. We thank you, Lord, for her love that she had for all of us. The fact that she would always go out of her way to help any one of us whenever we had need. We thank you, Lord, for bringing a person like that into our lives. We thank you for the time that we had together, even though it's never long enough. We thank you for the 91 years that we got to enjoy her on this earth. We pray, Lord, that you would teach us to number our days so that we may have a heart of wisdom. We pray, Lord, that we would live every single day for you and live every single day for each other, just as Bobbie would have wanted. These things we pray in your Son's name.